On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, we're joined by ThunderChats to talk about the NBA draft from a fan perspective. What should the Thunder do come draft night on today's show?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and editor-in-chief over at thunderousintentions.com, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're joined by superfan podcast host of Topic Thunder, ThunderChats, to discuss the 2023 NBA draft. Who are some favorite prospects, some least favorite prospects, what he's seen running his Thunder account, which almost everyone follows at ThunderChats on Twitter. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Always, it's an exciting time of year to talk draft, but always excited to talk Thunder basketball. Always exciting to talk to Rylan Stiles. So, excited to be here, man.
Excited to have you on. We always do a home and home for the draft, and we're doing it yet again today. Let's start with this. As someone who gets a ton of engagement from fans on Twitter, what has been, in your opinion, the most common name that you've heard that fans would like in the NBA draft?
Man, that's tough. I mean, it's kind of come in phases because, kind of at the beginning of the cycle, like immediately after the playoffs, and we kind of realized that we was going to have a higher chance at a lower pick. A lot of people were saying Anthony Black to the Thunder, which I'm sure we'll get into that later, kind of looking at the rundown. Like, he's not my favorite guy. Gradey Dick is a guy that I know you like, the shooting, like obvious fit. Kind of getting into like higher prospects. The guy that I've seen the most, and this is kind of universal, is Jarace Walker out of Houston, just because he kind of fits the need for both fans. You got the fans that want to see Presti continue this build of guys that multiple guys that can dribble, pass, shoot, make quick decisions with the basketball, and he kind of fits that build. And he also has the mold where he's a bigger guy. He's one of the most physical defenders in the draft. He's a good rebounder. He's a little bit undersized for the power forward position. I think he ended up measuring like 6'7" in shoes at the combine. So smaller than what the eye test would say, but in terms of like his fit next to Chet, the physicality, the defensive versatility that he would provide, and just the toughness he provide, I see a lot of fans gravitating to him just because he's kind of best of both worlds.
So you are a Thunder super fan, but also a Kentucky super fan.
Yeah.
What is the breakdown on Cason Wallace?
Man, I love Cason to death. I said him last night whenever we recorded our last episode, even if he wasn't a Kentucky player, I know people rolling their eyes about this, but I would still love Cason Wallace just because I value defense in a player. And if there's a guy that wants to play defense, that wants to guard you 94 feet, that wants to get all up in your jersey and make it his mission to shut you down, it is Cason Wallace in this draft. And just what he was able to do at Kentucky on the defensive end, goes without saying. Taking the toughest matchup night by night, has some of the quickest hands in the draft, as evidenced by his game against Michigan State, second or third game of the season at 8 steals. That doesn't happen a lot in college basketball. And he's a sneaky shot blocker for his position and for his size. And his length, kind of like Shea does also, his plus wingspan. I think he has a 6'10" wingspan. Definitely helps with that. But offensively, what we was able to see from him, he started off the season shooting really well, but kind of went out with injuries, and his shooting went off a cliff for a little bit. But in terms of the finishing, in terms of the different roles he played, because he started the year playing off ball and then he transitioned to an on ball role late in the year, and the creativity that he started to show in the pick and roll, he started to get more comfortable initiating and running the offense late in the season, and doing so with Oscar Tshiebwe parked in the lane 24/7 and absolutely no shooting to speak of besides Antonio Reeves making 5 or 0 threes, no in between. I was really impressed with what Cason could do. And, in terms of prospect wise, you've seen time and time again, Shea, Emmanuel Quickley, Tyler Hero, Jamal Murray, the list goes on and on and on about Kentucky guards that had more to show than what they showed in their 1 year in college once they got to the league. So, it kind of becomes a thing like, you already see these tangible tools that can add to a winning team, and there might be more under the hood.
Yeah, and NBA teams like him. I've heard that he's going to go in the top 10. We'll see if that happens on draft night.
Yep.
But as a Kentucky fan, is there anything that you've noticed or similarities between, you just rattled off all these guards that were a little bit undersold at Kentucky that ended up having a much better NBA career? Is there any like similarities between their games of like why they don't show everything at Kentucky?
Just something I've noticed with Cal is he puts you he doesn't put you in an uncomfortable position. He just really wants you to work on things that A, you're going to be doing in the league, but B, that your weakness, he really wants you to work on your weakness to, become a more complete prospect, because a lot of the things you see guys going into the league, like Devin Booker, he was the scorer, you watched high school tape, he was that scorer in high school. But when he came to Kentucky, forget being pigeonholed into a platoon system, he was kind of delegated as a 3-point spot up shooter, and he was very deadly in that role, and he was able to be drafted in the lottery by that. But he had so much left in the tank that he wasn't able to showcase because of the teammates around him. Now, it's not so much the case with Cason this year, or even in years past. As a Kansas fan, I'm sure you understand, playing against us, that there's not so much talent to speak of that they're having to pull back the reins so everybody else can eat. It's just a, kind of thing this is what Cal has been doing since he's got to Kentucky. Bam Adebayo's talked about it. I wasn't able to play make. I wasn't able to, kind of be as versatile on the defensive end as I am in the league that I was at Kentucky, because Cal really wanted me to just work on being a big man, rebound, finish around the basket, catch lobs, play defense inside. And, like I said, you can't say it's going to happen to every prospect that comes out of Kentucky, because, you do have BJ Boston, you have, Ty Washington, who have had flashes for sure, but, it's not an exact science.
So in this draft class, everyone's going to gravitate toward their favorites and their top guys. I am enamored by the big three of if the Thunder were to trade up and get Taylor Hendricks, Jarace Walker, Gradey Dick. At 12, big Leonard Miller fan. Coulibaly, also the riser now. Who are some of your favorite prospects in this draft at pick 12 and in that range?
Yeah, if I was going to highlight my 4 favorites in the lottery, and I think it was around March or April, somebody had tweeted out claim your 4 favorites now. You had to post 4 pictures of them. My 4 people were Taylor Hendricks, the aforementioned Cason Wallace, Osor Thompson, and Bilal Coulibaly, even then. And I would say, Taylor Hendricks, his fit goes without saying, man. 3-point shooting, a 40% 3-point shooter at 6'9" height. Defensively, just an absolute monster. Has the upside to be a legitimate terror perimeter defender, but as we've seen already, he's a force in terms of his shot blocking and rim protecting and help side defense. And just imagining him and Chet Holmgren walking down the paint is just has me salivating. So I really like that. I think that him and Chet offer a lot of the same things in terms of strength wise, offensively and defensively, that we've kind of been lacking this year at the 4 and 5 position. So I would really love that fit. We already kind of talked about Case, and I won't speak too much more about him. Osor Thompson, I think that, the way this draft is kind of shaken out, after really the 3rd spot, everybody has legitimate flaws. They're really tantalizing prospects, but they're flawed. So at that point, say Hendricks is gone, Walker's gone, Whitmore's gone, Dick's gone, all these people, Cason's gone, and you get to 12, and, you're sitting there and Osor Thompson's gone because, people are worried about the jump shot. They don't think that he's as good of a playmaker as his brother. All these things that, caused him to fall. I would like the Thunder to take a shot at him because, the potential, the upside is insane. Again, kind of like Taylor Hendricks, I think defensively he could be a demon on the defensive end. Just his instincts, his quickness, and his want to. He's legitimately got that dog in him on the defensive end. And offensively, I think Amin obviously flourished with the ball in his hands, but Osor played more off ball. And I think that he could really fit alongside our playmakers and Shea, Giddey, Jalen Williams, because I think that's one of his biggest strengths is his slashing and his cutting. And he's really smart at it. He makes really sharp cuts. And obviously his athleticism everybody knows about. Like, he's one of the most explosive athletes in the draft, one of the most explosive athletes we've evaluated in like the last 5 years. So, I just imagine him like going backdoor off of a cut and Giddy just slinging it past him. He just exploding in the lane. Like, yeah, I love that. And I think shooting wise, I think that he's a little bit ahead of his brother. His shot's not broken, and we got Chip England. And I know I talked a lot, but I mean, I just got to say, Bilal Coulibaly, like, he's my guy. Like, hashtag Coulibaly crew, hashtag Coulibaly, like all the corny catchphrase Coulibaly things. That's me, man. Like, I had highlighted him early in March when he was a second-round prospect, and he's just kind of jumped up. As we keep going on, he's playing in the playoffs right now, and something that Nathan Grubel, Draft Deeper, No Ceiling, said on my podcast yesterday, what is most interesting, most telling, is they're letting this 18-year-old kid, who came in halfway through the year on this playoff team, second-best team in this French league, in the playoffs, and they're starting to give him pick-and-roll ball handling reps. Like, that's something they're just throwing at him in the playoffs. Like, he kind of played strictly off ball, throughout the season, and they're letting him try stuff in the playoffs. And not only that, it's working. Like, his game yesterday was one of the best games I've seen from him on both sides of the ball. Defensively, he's just a black hole. He's Bilal consuming, as they say. And yeah, offensively, much like Amon, his slashing, his cutting's great, but he's starting to show a lot of flashes of what he can do with the ball in his hands. He's still very raw. He's still very young, but I've seen a lot of growth and upside in that aspect of his game.
Coming up, should the Thunder trade up in this draft? Who are our least favorite prospects at pick 12? And moving forward with the rest of the draft class. But first, I want to tell you right now about good friends over at Game Time. Game Time is incredible. It's where you want to be if you're buying tickets to your favorite events, because it shouldn't be stressful, and it's not at Game Time, because Game Time is there. It is fast and easy to use to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, theater, everything near you, with killer deals on last-minute tickets for the best prices guaranteed. You can stop stressing over the tickets and just get hyped over the fun you're going to have at these events with flash deals, last-minute tickets. It's easy to find your tickets. They go right into your phone. It's great, and every event in your area is on Game Time. You get an image from your seat. You even get event cancellation protection, last-minute prices guaranteed, and if you somehow find a better deal, well, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So go there right now, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, you create your account, you redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase when you download the Game Time app today. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast. On the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're dashing our way to the draft, the podcast every day, with player profiles and interviews today, talking to ThunderChats of the Topic Thunder podcast, and of course, his Twitter account at ThunderChats on Twitter. So let's move into our least favorite prospects at pick 12. I'm interested to see if we have any of the same names.
Yeah, man. There's a few there. I mentioned Anthony Black earlier, and I think that a lot of the draft guys that we've had on, they've mentioned like how much they love Black as a prospect, and I do think that Black is a guy that can succeed in this league with the tools that he has and the playmaking, the basketball IQ, the feel, and the defense. Like, I think all of that translates. But what that feels like to me is a less talented Josh Giddey, kind of. So it's like a little redundant. Obviously, the defense is a plus. Like, he's ahead of Giddey as a defender, but I think Giddey showed strides in his defense. Like, just like playing physical, kind of knowing where to be. Still got to work it a little bit on the foot speed, but offensively, I mean, dude dropped 31, 10, and 9 in his first play-in game at 19, 20 years old. So like, I mean, I would, let's roll with that guy instead of Anthony Black and kind of muddying up the waters with him. Other than him, we got Rayan Rupert out of New Zealand. I mean, I don't hate Rupert. I mean, I see the intrigue, and I see, a lot of the same connections that fans are making. I've made the same connections last year with Ousmane Dieng when I said the Thunder should draft Ousmane Dieng. But I feel like he's kind of really similar to Ousmane Dieng, and I don't like. He's shorter than Ousmane Dieng. I think he has less creation ability than Ousmane Dieng. Sure, defensively, he's a dog. Like, I'll give you that. Like, he's a physical defender 100%. And we've seen Uz struggle a little bit with aggressiveness. But we saw legitimate flashes out of Ousmane Dieng that, he's going to have, like, a good NBA career. He's got a lot of upside in terms of creating with the ball, his 3-point shooting, and defensively. Like, he had some like legitimate flashes of on-ball defense and off-ball. I think that he's kind of there now. Like, I thought he was really good off-ball defender. So again, kind of redundancy there. And then another guy that I was thinking about, I don't remember who else I had, but this guy for sure, Nick Smith Jr. Out of Arkansas. Like, I get the idea of him, and I get that, if you have a high volume shooter, a guy that can hit shots off movement, a guy that can, just straight up give you buckets off the bench, like, that's appealing. But we kind of have that already with Tre Mann. And obviously Tre Mann's kind of going through struggles, but we saw year one Tre Mann, and, we're desperately trying to get back to year one Tre Mann. But I feel like, again, that kind of muddies the waters of Tre Mann. I think that, there's other combo guards that provide something different than Nick Smith Jr. and Tre Mann. If you're going to bring somebody in to kind of compete for that 6-man position with Tre Mann, like Cason gives you defense. I think Keontae George is a better movement shooter than the both of them. Just like, small examples in that front. But I don't know, man, like Nick Smith Jr. is like his frame and, just the issues that he kind of faced, even coming back from injury last year, kind of getting delegated to the bench on a competitive team. Like, I have more questions than I do answers with Nick Smith Jr. So I'd rather just stray away from that guy too.
Yeah, and obviously, whoever the Thunder draft, people, including us, are going to talk ourselves into it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's going to be a while before I can talk myself into repair. I don't see it with them. Yes, he's a really good defender, which is great. He's not at all a factor at all on offense. And I don't see how he's ever going to be a factor on offense. I don't even see upside for him to become a good offensive player in the NBA. So defensive specialist at pick 12 is not exactly appetizing. Even a guy like Nick Smith Jr., he being so young, you talk yourself into his high school tape and everything like that. Jordan Hawkins is a guy that, like, he immediately filled the shooting need. He's, I think, the second or third best shooter in this draft class, but I think he's more so the specialist shooter that people try to predict Gradey Dick to be. I think he's even more one-dimensional than what Gradey Dick is. I think that Gradey Dick does not get enough credit for just how much he brings to the table besides just his shooting. So he'd be another one to me, but really the only realistic name at 12 that I could see the Thunder taking him realistically, and I just wouldn't like it, would be Repair. It would be a very tough sell for me on Repair.
There is another name that I remember now. I'm sorry. I just came on here to spew some hate, but Gigi Jackson, I know Rafael Barlow was on your pod and kind of talked about, Chris Paul was lobbying Sam Presti to maybe take Gigi Jackson. I just want to remind everybody that Chris Paul's a member of the Phoenix Suns now. So, this could be a competitive advantage in Chris Paul's camp. But no, all jokes aside, I just think that he's extremely young. Obviously, he showed some cases of immaturity, makes terrible decisions with the basketball in his hands, and has just some of the worst shot selection that I've seen, like, in a prospect. So I think that it would behoove Gigi Jackson. It would have behooved Gigi Jackson to go back for another year at South Carolina, or even enter the transfer portal and go somewhere else with, like, a better system. But obviously he's not. I think that a culture like the Thunder would be good for him. Like, I agree with Rafael Barlow on that point that, the Thunder would be good for him, but I don't necessarily think that Gigi Jackson would be good for the Thunder.
Yeah, I think with Gigi, it would be a special case where if you traded back into the first round to draft him, you kept 12, and then you got another one in the first round, and you could practically just treat this as a total redshirt year, given that we know the development that and investment that they've put into the G League with Oklahoma City Blue, and just kind of stash him there for a year, give him some minutes in the NBA, but overall he's mainly a blue player for a year, and you kind of work some of that bad habits out of there. That'd be fine. But at pick 12, it wouldn't be the best value on the board, I don't think, at pick 12, because you would really be slow playing it moving forward. But should the Thunder move up from pick 12 in your opinion, or is there enough value at pick 12 where it's not worth the extra assets you would need to move up in the draft?
I mean, I would just say the answer to your questions is yes, just in general. I think there's a lot of value to be had at pick 12. I think that this is a pretty deep draft class, pretty much anywhere in the lottery I'd be happy with. But yeah, I think that, given what we know about the draft class for next year and how weak it's supposed to be and how many picks, how much draft capital we're going to have in that draft, I think that it would make a lot of sense for us to try to, package some of that capital to move up in this draft to go grab a guy like Jarace Walker, Taylor Hendricks, even Cam Whitmore is a guy that, a lot of fans are kind of, poo-pooing that idea just because, he doesn't have a lot of playmaking or like decision-making with the basketball or anything like that. But, I would argue that, maybe Presti has, filled the cupboard with these playmakers, and eventually, you can't pass the ball for 24 seconds. Like, eventually somebody's got to shoot that thing. So I think that, it would be nice to have a play finisher like Cam Whitmore, a guy that catch and shoot, catch and go. Like, I think that he would fit great in the offense. And then defensively, he's shown upside to be a strong physical defender that, can really lock in, as like a small ball forward, guard a little bit threes, give you a little bit of defensive versatility. But yeah, I absolutely think like home run, full disclosure, I have Taylor Hendricks over Jarace Walker just because the fit is just seamless, 100%. Jarace, I would be very excited about, if that's who we decide to trade up for. But I definitely think fans get it twisted because I'm posting the Bilal Coulibaly propaganda every chance I can get because, people don't realize he's one of the only prospects still playing real basketball at this time. So obviously we're going to be posting about what he's been doing, but just because I'm posting so much about that, first and foremost, I want to trade up. I want to trade up and get one of those guys that, slide in perfectly to that 4 spot, kind of be that 3-4 position that we need so desperately bad.
It'll be interesting to see. And I think that Cam Whitmore, as you said, I mean, eventually the archetype and the thing that you're looking for is going to change. Like Sam Presti is eventually going to change. Is it going to be, in 2 weeks? I don't know. Yeah. It could be in 2 years, could be in 3 years, whatever. But eventually it'll change. And so if that changes this year, that'd be interesting about Cam Whitmore. I think that Cam Whitmore is another example of on draft night, you might see some mixed opinions. The night after, Friday night, after the draft's over, right before the introductory press conference.
Oh, yeah.
People are going to be going on YouTube. They're going to find his high school tape and his high. I'll be honest with you,
the FIBA tape too, man.
Yeah, his everything pre-college is why I have him in the top 5 right now and on my big board is because he's just so talented before he got to Villanova, and it was just a weird fit at Villanova. So I think that if the Thunder did trade up for him, they'd obviously think that they can tap back into that with their system and their ability to develop. So yeah, I think that he would be a name that on draft night might be like, oh, you trade up for him and not Walker or Hendricks or Gradey Dick or whoever we've been hyping up, and people would then have to take a step back and say, whoa, hold on a second, this guy's actually really, really good. Coming up, we've talked favorites, we've talked least favorites. Who is the most realistic option at pick 12 if they don't move up, and some second round sleepers. But first, let's hear right now, our good friends over at Prize Picks, folks. PrizePicks.com, Prize Picks app. Go there, use the code LOCKEDON. You get a 100% deposit match up to $100. And when you go there, it just makes watching games more entertaining. Taking, for example, the NBA Finals. You can go and you can bet on Game 3 of the NBA Finals. Say, well, will Jokic score more or less than 22.5 points? Will Jimmy Butler dish out more or less than 5.5 assists? If you're right, you can win 25 times your money on any entry. You pick 2 to 6 players, and bada bing, bada boom, you're playing Prize Picks and having a lot of fun doing it. They also have MLB, NFL. They have every sport you can imagine, including the WNBA going on right now. So check it out today, PrizePicks.com, Prize Picks app, promo code LOCKEDON, 100% deposit match up to $100. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Thunder Chats, we've talked all about the 12th overall pick. To put a bow on that, who do you think is the most realistic target to walk away with if the board is just status quo and the Thunder pick at pick 12 come draft night?
See, I think there's a couple ways to look at that. I think that, if I was answering in my heart of hearts, I'm going to say Bilal Coulibaly, but I've talked a lot about him, so I'm going to give you somebody different. I think that if you were going based off how the boards look and, if it's just going as chalk as could be, I would say probably Cason as well, but I'm not going to talk about him. I'll go with Kobe Buffkin, who gives you a little bit of, what Cason does defensively, albeit less physical, less of a wingspan. But he's kind of an all-around prospect. He gives you a lot of everything. He gives you some shooting, gives you some playmaking, some ball handling. And, he was kind of thrust into the lead ball handler role late in the Michigan season. And, definitely, had some uncomfortable spots, but he flashed a lot of really impressive passes. I think it was actually Richard Staven Mavs Draft who posted kind of like his passing highlights early in the year. And I was like, whoa, like he's got some legit juice as like, as a playmaker. So I like the idea of Kobe Buffkin. If he was to fall to us, Keontae George is another guy I kind of mentioned, just again, the shooting. I think that he's a guy that you could bring in to compete with Trey Mann for that kind of 6-man spot. Obviously, the shooting is one thing, but like just the scoring in general, like, he's a microwave scorer. He's a guy that can get hot in a hurry. He can do it from mid-range. He's a strong finisher. Like that, I think that's really what separates him from Trey Mann, is just how stout he is. I think he lost a little bit of weight after the season, but I mean, that's just lent to his explosiveness. We've already seen how explosive an athlete he could be. And I think that he's been slept on a little bit on defense. This Baylor team was kind of a mess this year as opposed to years past. So, much like Cam Whitmore, Villanova, I don't think we got to see the full gamut of what Keontae George could be. And I think that, he's refocused. He went through a little bit of injuries. He's healthy. I would love to see the Thunder take a swing on him. But if you're asking me the most realistic scenario, Rylan, the most realistic is Sam Presti surprises everybody with a pick that nobody's talking about, with a player that people probably think that we're reaching for at 12. So I'm going to say Sam Presti reaches for Dariq Whitehead. And I say that because he's one of the youngest players in the draft, so he's got a lot of upside. Last year, obviously he suffered an injury preseason. He was able to work his way back into the rotation midseason after, roles had already been set. And the way he was able to work his way back in, not only work his way back in, but to shoot 40% from three for the rest of the season on like limited role, limited touches. Like, I mean, that says something to me. And obviously the shooting would be amazing. You saw flashes whenever he was playing at Montverde. Not so much his senior year because, that was his show. Like that was his time to go out there and try to drop 40 every night. But when he was playing more of a role in like his sophomore and junior years, you saw legit flashes of a guy that like locks in on the defensive end. And I think that, as he comes in, to the Thunder system, we know how much Coach D, relies on defense, and how much he wants you to play defense to get out there. Shout out Trey Mann once again. So I think that, he's a guy that has a lot of tools that can, kind of get you out there on defense. The shooting, obviously, tailor-made fit. And I think that teams might take a look at the AJ Griffin situation last year and about how many teams were like so shaky on him just because, yeah, he was injured throughout the season. He doesn't have the same athleticism going into high school career, but he's still a really productive player. He's still a guy that can come in and space the floor, fill it up in a hurry, knock down like 4 or 5 threes, in a game. And I think that Dariq Whitehead is a guy that kind of fills that archetype.
I think that would be an interesting pick at pick 12, and I would be fascinated by what he would develop into in the NBA, no matter where he goes in this draft. Now, to tie this together, the Thunder do have pick 37 and pick 50. Do you have any second-round draft crushes? Because mine is Kobe Brown out of Missouri. If the Thunder, I told Clemente Almanza this, if the Thunder get Kobe Brown out of Missouri in the second round, I will have to excuse myself from Thunder Ion. I will be screaming of happiness if they were to get Kobe Brown.
Yeah, no, I really like Kobe Brown. As you said, I'm a Kentucky fan, so Kobe Brown gave us buckets, about 30 of them in Rupp Arena. So shout out Kobe Brown. I really like what he can give, his size and, kind of what he was able to do with the basketball in his hands, kind of as more of like an on-ball role this year was really impressive at Missouri. I know there's a lot of questions about, the shooting jump and how suspect that is, but I mean, it looked pretty legit in Rupp Arena. So I like it as a swing, but in terms of guys that I really like, obviously Brandon Podziemski, it's kind of jury's out. Like he was a big winner of the combine, but, talking to some of the guys that are kind of around the scouting game, apparently teams aren't 100% sold on. They don't really know what to do with him. So maybe he might still be there early second round. And I think that, if you go like with one of those big forwards, or even if you go with like a wing like Koulibaly, I think that bringing in a guard, slash wing type like Pods, also, a guy that Jalen Williams helped recruit to Santa Clara, good for team chemistry as well. But I think his shooting, like for one, his shot chart, like, shout out to No Ceilings. I know you had Wrecker on last week. They had the shot charts from Synergy up. Like his is just all red, like 100% all red. Like it's ridiculous. And the athleticism and his passing, he's got some of the best passing in the class. Like I would love him. And then Julian Strother is a guy that like, there's a lot of mixed opinions on. And, you know, I've seen some people have him wait first, and I've seen that some people have him like wait second round. I think that if you can get him at 37 or 50, he's the guy that I would love to have just because his shooting, man. Like, he was one of the best shooters in the class at his size as a wing, 6'6", 6'7", has experience playing alongside Chet Holmgren. So, you know, make our guy Chet a little bit more comfortable, and in turn making Julian more comfortable. Just his ability to space the floor, his size and his position would be extremely coveted. And, you know, his familiarity with Chet, you know, on knowing where they're going to be offensively, where they're going to be defensively. I think that, you know, that could kind of be a sleeper pick. And I really don't see why teams are overlooking a guy with his shooting caliber.
Yeah, Brandon is an interesting case. I mean, I've heard from a source very close to the situation that he got great feedback and teams are going to take him in the 20s, but then you see mock drafts and they haven't really caught up to that yet. So where is he at? Who really knows? We'll see as this progresses, as this goes forward. Mike Miles is another name that's really interesting, I think, for the Thunder. Jordan Walsh, really interesting for the Thunder as well, as that Arkansas pipeline continues to develop on down the line. Speaking of your Kentucky fandom earlier, though.
Oh, man.
What's the rap on Oscar Tshiebwe?
See, man, I love Oscar to death. I mean, you know, obviously National Player of the Year 2 years ago. You know, $1 million smile. Like, he was a fan favorite for years. He's just so one-dimensional, really offensively and defensively. Like, you know, he's one of the best rebounding prospects we've probably seen in the past decade. And, like, you know, if this was 10 years ago, we're talking about him as a top 5 pick. But he's just a throwback big man. Like, you know, he's got a post game. He cleans up around the basket better than anybody else, but gets lost in the pick and roll, doesn't give you a lot offensively if he doesn't have his back to the basket. I know that he's working on, you know, adding a little bit of a mid-range, maybe even a corner three, and I just don't know how much I trust that because, like, his touch was kind of suspect in college. But in terms of, like, effort and, you know, just, like, team chemistry and a guy to bring in, like, to establish culture, like, on your team, not even establish culture, but, like, a guy that's good for your culture on your team, like, I mean, Oscar Tshiebwe, like, I can't say enough good things about him, but I've seen some people like, you know, the Thunder should get him. You know, he's a big guy that can play alongside Chet Holmgren. You know, we need rebound and we need physicality. Like, guys, no. Like, I love Oscar Tshiebwe. Just no. Try to tell y'all about Olivier Sarr, but y'all don't listen. But no, just no.
And hopefully Olivier Sarr's brother will be joining Oklahoma City in a couple of years.
Yeah.
But that's another draft pod. That's going to be our next draft pod. We're going to be talking about Olivier Sarr's brother,
and Cody Williams.
Yeah, and Cody Williams. Let's just get all the brothers in Oklahoma City pronto because they are great, just as their brothers are, older brothers. Yeah, Tshiebwe, rebounding is the easiest trait to translate to the NBA, but that's pretty much all he has, in my opinion. So I don't love the fit. Pick 50 with 3 two-way deals. Who cares? But I just in general, even if he's on the Thunder, I wouldn't expect him to play a whole lot and make a huge impact. I think that Olivier Sarr's role on that two-way deal would really mirror what Tshiebwe could bring to an NBA team, where he might look good for a 10-minute stretch here and there, and you're clamoring for, like, why isn't he playing more? And then you do play him more, and then you realize why he's not playing more in the NBA. So
yeah, and
kind
honestly,
of a tweener.
I would rather have Sarr, like, on the Thunder minutes than Tshiebwe. Like, and Tshiebwe is 100% better player than Sarr, but Sarr is not a throwback big. Like, he will space the floor, he will go get lobs. Like, yeah, I'd rather have Sarr. And
he's very fun to watch with the blue. And so as somebody who watches all the blue home games, that's very, very interesting to me. I care about that a lot to entertain me at these games, especially on doubleheader days, whenever you're there for like 12 hours. But ThunderChats, thank you for joining us. What's going on in your world? I don't want to spoil anything, but you do have a massive episode coming up, if I do say so myself.
Yeah. No, we just had, I think, 18 draft scouts from different avenues kind of around the internet, and, from like draft Twitter to like, actually established draft sites. Obviously all the no ceilings guys. We've had Matt Babcock, we've had Mav Draft on, like we've had a lot of draft guys on, just kind of getting the full gamut of, the draft cycle. And we're about to shift into just straight. These have been Thunder perspectives, but a lot of times when you ask about a guy, they just kind of talk about, how they are as a prospect. But we're about to shift into full on just Thunder mode. Like we're bringing in a couple people to kind of represent Thunder Twitter. We're bringing in a few different Thunder podcasts, and then we are wrapping it all up with, once again, our Thunder Roundtable. This will be our third year doing it with Andrew selected down to Duncan the Athletic, Brandon Rabar of Daily Thunder, and of course, Rylan Stiles of Locked On Thunder. And, it's one of our biggest episodes of the year. You guys crush it every time. It's one of the most fun episodes that we do every year, where we just kind of like our final thoughts on the draft, who we want, predictions, why this guy sucks. Like it's just a great time. So definitely stay tuned to that on the Top Thunder podcast, and kind of check out our archive of, the other draft episodes that we've done, because, there's no stone unturned when it comes to prospects in the Thunder's range at that point.
Go check it out, the Topic Thunder podcast, anywhere you get your podcast from. Thank you for checking out Locked On Thunder. Subscribe to both podcasts anywhere you get your podcast from. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.